Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
I'm excited for today's episode because we are going to be talking Michael Keaton Batman. That's right, we're doing the Flash movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Michael Keaton. So chef's kiss.
Yeah,
so good.
It's so good. So
I've missed
good.
him.
We're eventually gonna at some point mention the main character in the movie, and I put that in quotes because
Yeah.
what's the name of our podcast? Exactly. It's not Flash Therapy. It's
And actually, before we get started, in case there's anyone listening who has conflicting feelings about the whole Ezra Miller situation, we recognize that there's some stuff that went on with them in terms of potentially just what's the best word? Wait, I don't know officially what happened, but there's been a lot of legal stuff, and there's been some concerning things that came up. It sounds like they've had some situations happen. So just acknowledging that is out there, and there's some complicated background stuff related to this movie.
yeah. Never meet your heroes unless I'm your hero. Then meet me.
Well, and I think it's just once again one of those lessons in life is not black and white, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I believe they even talked about like seeking treatment and whatnot. There was just a lot of things going on, and unfortunately other people getting harmed in the process, and just a lot of complicated stuff.
Interesting situation. But yeah, it's one of those things where constantly I feel like whenever you're talking about movies or TV shows, there definitely comes a time where if you are a fan of something, you pick a moment where it's like, okay, I have to separate the character from the act from the actor that plays them, and it can be a reverse scenario. So like for example, like all the stuff going on with Ezra off the camera is not the same as Barry Allen, right? And then like I look at this, another situation and I say, okay, the actor that plays Ramsey Bolton probably isn't a bad guy. Ramsey Bolton, on
So
the other
flipping it.
hand,
Yeah.
oh god, never want to run into that guy, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's one of those things where there's definitely a line, and I think everyone is allowed to set their own limits as far as what they can handle, as far as what an actor does when they are off the camera. And if you can still watch a movie and maintain that, like, okay, this is a movie versus the person playing that character, which
there's also, the concerns about promotion and how much do we promote or encourage or reinforce. I think there's also a difference between, I guess, situations happening and how do we adjust given what has occurred, and
right.
what is acknowledged, what is worked on, how do we try and prevent. Because there's also certain things that are allotted to famous people. And I'm not saying that those famous people are like, oh, yeah, I'm doing this so that I get away with X, Y, or Z. I'm not saying that's happening. But we just have to be mindful about, the pedestal that is there for certain people that can kind of be disconnected from who they are as a person. Like you're saying, someone's put on a pedestal because of this role they have, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they even want to be on that pedestal, let alone are able to live up to that. So just being mindful that sometimes we um, create vulnerability for people, and making sure that that's not happening. Like, it's a problem if, say, you have a lot of things are coming out, for example, about, things that came out about Joss Whedon or other people where they were creating unsafe environments, and how do we not promote that sort of thing too? So
Right.
I'm totally with you, and also acknowledging that it's a very complicated thing. We acknowledge that stuff's going on, and we did choose to watch this movie and are talking about it. And Michael Keaton, and please dear
Yes.
God, Michael Keaton, be a pure, wonderful
No,
soul.
he's the best. He's the best.
Yeah,
I
he's
personally
so
know
good.
him. He's a great guy. We're best friends.
Yeah,
Yeah, he says hello. Says hello.
he's so great in that movie.
Yeah.
Um,
He
I yeah
picks up right
I
where he left off. Like he really does. It's a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
I will say that's what put me in the seat for this movie. I
Mm,
Nothing really caught me. Well, I will say, Supergirl. Seeing that Supergirl was going to be in
mm,
it, that actually I was really excited about that, and I really loved her. I love her
yeah.
so
It was
much.
very it was very interesting what they did, because I think so, we had our reaction video to the Flash trailer on our YouTube channel, and you and I kind of talked about how it seemed like they were strongly pulling from Flashpoint,
Yeah,
and yet it wasn't Flashpoint. And that definitely happened. Supergirl was kind of placed in positions where Superman was before. You still had a Batman that was different than his Batman that he interacted with, but it wasn't Thomas Wayne. They did this funny, Bruce Wayne actor swap that
yeah,
was just hysterical.
absolutely.
So yeah, they pulled from Flashpoint, which, if you've been listening to us, we love. Because when did we do that? Did we do that last season?
Yep, we did
Yeah,
Flashpoint. Yeah,
we
last
love Flashpoint. So they pulled
Elseworlds.
some great stuff from that, but they also changed things too. I don't. I don't know. I think I still prefer Flashpoint overall, kind of how they did it.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. Well, and the big thing is too, this movie did not have Eobard Thawne, didn't have Reverse
yeah,
Flash in it. They kind of
your
just
favorite.
they glossed over it, which it lost a couple points for me right there. And then it's funny because you this is a movie where you can look at it by itself, because James Gunn has already said, like, this isn't touching my new universe. Like, this is its own thing. I'm handling everything else here on out. Nothing that smelled like Snyder is gonna come anywhere near my new universe.
So
Like,
no more George Clooney.
right, yeah, that was but yeah, it was like yeah, that was a fun joke, a fun way to end
That was so
in that.
great. That was so great.
I liked it. But the Flash of this universe is very, very interesting. And one thing I've heard
Mm.
a lot of people mention, whether it's in reviews that they've done or when I've talked with people about it, they've all mentioned that this Barry Allen definitely seems like he's on the spectrum.
He does seem like there might be like an autism spectrum. Yeah, some being somewhere on that spectrum might be happening, or at least informed from that. So something similar to that,
Yeah,
in terms of just cognitively being different than, your normative, quote unquote, brain. So
yeah,
sometimes people say like neurodivergent, or people prefer kind of different ways of talking about it. But yeah, it does seem like there's a bit of the autism
yeah.
factor in there, which is, it's nice to see.
It is.
Um,
It is.
it's nice to see just representation of different kinds of people, and seeing them be accepted.
Yeah,
Uh, he definitely has like this oddity in terms of trying to connect with people, and he seems frustrated with it in some ways at the start. He definitely has kind of less eye contact and other things. I'd have to watch again, to be honest, to see if he has any kind of repetitive behaviors or almost tick-like physical components that you also tend to see with autism.
yeah.
Nothing comes to mind immediately, but I wasn't looking for it.
Right. And it's one of those things. Like, yeah, he's definitely a very different Barry Allen from like the comic books or television shows
Yes.
iterations of him, and it just goes to show that like the everything in the Snyderverse is just one big connected Elseworlds, and it started from the
Mhm.
very beginning because it was like, what if Superman snapped Zod's neck, and then it followed up like, what if Batman killed people, and
Mm.
what if, and so every what if Aquaman was cool, right? Like it's all one big fun what if universe. I say
Yeah.
fun, it's pretty dark. It's always
Yeah.
cloudy and bleak,
It's always
but
cloudy in DC Comics.
I mean I do love me some Hans Zimmer score for Man of
Yeah.
Steel though.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things. That's the best thing to come out of the Snyderverse by far.
Yeah.
Um,
So that so in turn, I know we love Michael Keaton, and we'd probably just talk about Michael Keaton the whole time if we could. But obviously, the
yep.
movie's about Flash, and if you're talking about Flash, you're talking about how he's ruining, the space time continuum and changing time and ruining everyone else's lives.
He
Uh,
can't help himself.
can't help himself. It would be so tempting. Can
Absolutely.
you imagine you wake up in the morning and you miss your alarm, and then the rest of your day is ruined. I'm a pretty conscientious person, but I would think to myself, like, I mean, is it really that big of a deal if I just go back and like adjust my alarm so that I wake up and it's all good?
Also, I am kind of annoyed at the idea of the Flash being late for anything. I'm like, "Come on, man. Like, we have to sit in
Yeah,
traffic. Like, come on, get it together, dude.
it is.
Make your own sandwich."
Yeah, I love that he's late because he has to get the sandwich. It's like, just go to the vending machine.
Right,
That's what happens when you don't plan ahead enough.
right.
Yeah, it is an interesting kind of thing. And it it works actually, I think, best with this different version of Flash, even though I know that there are other versions where they hit on this with Barry Allen too, not being on time. But like, given his quirkiness, so a lot of times there can be other cognitive differences. And so how you track time and losing track of time and just not being able to kind of get to things and predict, okay, so if I need to be there at this time, then I
Yeah,
need to, okay, how long does this take? And da, 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 working backwards. Those are pretty high order things, and some people are better at those than others. And
yeah,
so I've worked with some folks that, I'm not saying everyone on the autistic spectrum has this, and it's not the only cause by any means, but I've worked with some folks where that was a bit difficult for them, being able to kind of play it backwards. And
yeah,
so no matter how good the traffic was that day, you end up being late.
yeah.
So I do kind of
Inevitable.
love that as a part of this character, and also him maybe not fully playing out like, oh, maybe I could do something other than the sandwich.
Right. Yeah,
So I do like that. And yet when he's got to be a hero, even though he's like, why am I always just at everyone else's beck and call? He's able to, when it really counts, pull it all together and say, okay, let me figure this out.
yeah. I do love how nice Affleck Batman is to him. Like,
Yeah, it's
I
cute.
do, yeah, it is. It's really cute. Like, I do love, like, their relationship. It's like, "Oh, that's cool. Way to come around, Batman. We're
Yeah.
gonna ignore that in this universe you love killing people, but that's at least
Look,
you're friends with Barry."
look, I enjoy Ben Affleck
Oh,
Batman.
yeah.
It's
He's
it's
great.
very Frank Miller. I don't know. I enjoy him, and I could totally see this rough around the edges Batman having a soft spot for Barry Allen in this
Yeah.
universe. I totally see it, and I love it so
Absolutely,
much.
especially, like, after the Robins and the
Yeah.
Batgirls, like, and now he has, like, this character, and so it's interesting because it really the movie, it jumps right into it from that aspect because he, like, runs to Gotham and saves, like, a floor full of babies that for some reasons at the top of a skyscraper
Yeah.
because
All these babies fall out of the window and a therapy dog. Poor
yep,
dog.
and a vending machine where he can eat from while they're falling, and it's I if there was anything that I could take out of that movie, it would be that whole scene.
So here's my thing. I am always the person complaining about the CGI. I'm always the person saying, "That was CGI." And a lot of times it's like, "That did not have to be CGI. There was no reason for it, and it doesn't even look real." And then a lot of times other people go, "I don't even know what you're talking about." I'm like,
Right.
"No, no, no, it looks fake." So then here you have this. To me, it was just laughable,
Yeah.
where it was like so bad that it almost didn't bother me.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay,
It was
interesting
like
choice."
it was really bad. It was really bad, like, to the point that I really lowered my expectations when that was at the beginning, and so I was pleasantly surprised when that didn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
I was like,
I
"Oh,
I
thank
wasn't liking the
goodness."
CGI leading up to it.
Yeah.
So by the time that happened, I went, "Well,
Mm.
it wasn't looking that great to me anyway," and now bam.
Right, I'm like, "Oh, man, I haven't." I remember my first Xbox, like yeah, I was like it had, like, Halo 1 graphics. I'm like, "What is happening right now?" But
Yeah.
I the movie did have a lot of heart, though, because you really
Mm,
see that Barry is in a pretty desperate situation. He lost his mom, so
yeah.
clearly there's grief there, there's trauma there, but on top of that, the entire world thinks that his dad
Mhm.
murdered his mom, and Barry is like, this that isn't true.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. I have to figure out a way to clear his name to the point that he becomes a CSI. He becomes like
Yeah.
a crime scene investigator just so that he can be in that environment and hope to eventually figure out how to clear his dad's name because his dad just has like life in prison and
Yep.
Barry has essentially just grown up visiting his dad constantly back and forth in prison for a crime that we know he didn't commit. And
Yeah.
that was one thing that was interesting in this movie is like us going into it knowing like
Mhm.
being in Barry's corner versus in this universe the entire world's like yeah the dad definitely killed his wife right like that's what we
Yeah.
would be saying if we were in there like oh I've
Mm.
seen this true crime documentary the dad definitely killed the wife it wasn't a yellow supervillain from the future
Mhm.
right
Well, and, it was so sad for me to see how, as a CSI, as he was working on cases, you saw how much he empathized and related, obviously, to these different crimes and really wanting to do absolutely everything to look at all of the evidence
yeah
to the nth degree in so much detail. And then they didn't focus on it much, but I really honed in on how his coworkers and his boss really were disconnected from him. They didn't have that own personal
yeah
experience, and they were focused in a way that almost seemed a little like they were villainized a teeny tiny bit,
yeah
but they had a point there where they're they have so much backlog that they're saying, "Hurry it up, Barry. We can't afford for you to be spending this much time." And they're really having to they were alluding to the fact that they have to triage. And so how much time and effort and energy do you put into each one? Because the more you put into this one case, the less other cases you're able to get to that need attention. And I really felt for that given in mental health, we unfortunately also, it can be hard to hit on everything and you have to find these ways to triage. So it's really interesting to see that contrast at
and
his workplace.
and it's interesting too because like there's so many times where people get into professions and it has a reason like that right like
Yeah.
I've known several people it's like that became doctors after losing someone to an illness that was close to
Mm,
them when they were young, or they became a cop because they wanted to fight crime after something like this, something terrible
mhm.
happened to them violently, right? And so it's always really interesting when you have the people that do the job because their heart is really attached to it
Yeah,
versus someone who's like when's payday, right?
yeah,
And it's like Barry is that one that's like we have to look at every single case because I don't want what happened to my dad to happen to
yeah.
anyone else. And it's the
And
yeah,
and so this is a guy who the entire movie he turns out to be the bad guy because he can't let go and he has to save his mom while also saving the people who end up being hurt later in this universe because he saved his mom. All of this. This is a guy that cannot step back in a lot of ways. Even after all of that, he can't leave it alone. He still does something to instead change the evidence so that his dad doesn't end up in prison forever, or
yeah.
he's able to be released and found to be innocent and whatnot in the present day. So he still, despite all that, cannot let go. And you see that potentially in how he does his job as well, because what he's drawn to do is not wrong. But the amount of detail and attention that he wants to give, he will never get to the rest of the cases.
Yeah,
And so where's the balance? And remember, this is the guy who has super speed and is always late.
yeah. And
So he attends to the details in a lot of ways and is not able to look at the bigger picture. And so I think he would be at risk of not leaving a case until he has it solved. And so he never gets to any other cases.
And, like you said, he really does pay attention to details, and I'm not gonna lie, the movie went a different direction than I thought
Mm,
it did because we know what happened to Flash's mom, and I was still wondering if they were gonna go that route in this movie because what he changes, it isn't just going back in time and saving his mom. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back in time, make sure she doesn't forget, like, tomato sauce, so my dad never leaves home." In my
yeah.
mind, what I was thinking was gonna happen was he was gonna do that, go back to his timeline, and Reverse Flash just killed both of his parents instead of just his mom, which
That would have been better.
I'm
I mean, as a plot, let me clarify. That would have been better
yeah,
as a plot point.
yeah.
Excuse me, because that makes it sound like I just want a bunch of people to die.
But, well, also, it's still like it was kind of a hole that didn't make sense to me at that point because it's like, oh, kept the dad from leaving home. And I'm like, what? So Reverse Flash didn't kill the mom then? Like I was kind of confused
Oh, I see what you're
by that.
saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's Reverse Flash. Like he didn't like
Because it's essentially being treated like it was a random person taking advantage of the fact that she was home alone or something.
right. And so at that
Yeah.
point, I was like, okay, so maybe Reverse Flash didn't do it. Now I think either like the writer or director came out after the movie set came out and said, oh yeah, Reverse Flash did it, but it just
It
doesn't
doesn't
make
make
sense.
sense
It
then.
doesn't make sense then, right?
Especially given how we're gonna have to do Reverse Flash this season because
Yeah,
this is the summer of infamy.
yeah.
We're, doing the Flash because it came out. Um, but we'll definitely have to come back to the Flash territory for a Reverse Flash. And I mean, what you've talked about with him already, he's not gonna just let it go because Dad
Also,
showed up.
someone that pays attention to detail in the pettiest
Eh.
ways possible, right? And
They're
so
made for each other.
yeah, and so yeah, I thought that was I the movie went a different direction because I was sitting there thinking, and I'm
Mm,
like, oh, so he made sure the dad didn't leave home so that Reverse Flash will kill both of them, like, and that's what I was thinking was going to
uh.
happen. But apparently, Reverse Flash was like, oh, okay, cool, never mind. I'm not going to mess with
I I would
anything.
have almost loved it, toy with, pick at the fact that the Flash can't leave it all alone. And
Yeah,
instead of having him just get stuck with this one specific timeline and no, I have to fix this one, do this. Where the Reverse Flash screws him over every time, no matter what he does. So he keeps going back and back and back and
yeah,
back and back. And then that turns him into his own kind of villain. That would have
Yeah,
been so fun.
because looking at this, if we're being honest, with the Reverse Flash that we know and love to hate, he would have just gone and put the tomato sauce right back on the shelf.
So here's what I thought was gonna happen. I thought he picked the wrong color label because remember, she says, "This color, not that color."
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was gonna be the wrong one, so she ends up needing it anyway. Or, she's like, "Oh, this is the wrong one. Hey, can you go to the store?" That's what I thought was gonna happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I also thought that something wasn't gonna work in a different way with this. It was okay. There just seemed to be a lot of holes the more I think about it.
Yeah.
But once again, I'm okay with this movie existing because Michael Keaton.
Yeah. And, it was funny because looking at the situation, because we knew what was gonna happen, like, we knew going into
Mhm.
this, like, he's gonna go back in time to try
Yep.
and save his mom.
Yep.
And it's funny because you always, like, think about how you'll see people and it's like, okay, they have to make their own mistakes to
Mm.
see why it's bad. And then, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I was always one of those people that learned from other people's mistakes. Like, I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
really? Alright, cool. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go over there."
I'm that person that making a mistake feels so terrible. Can I just avoid that in
Yeah,
general?
yeah, yeah, and so the moment Bruce was like, "You can't go back in time. You can't screw it up." It's one
Mhm.
of those things where it's like, "Okay, if Batman says it's bad, then it's definitely bad." Right? But at the same
Mm.
time, being that attached to a situation, I don't know anyone that wouldn't try,
Yeah.
right? I
And
don't know anyone that would not try despite
that's the thing.
knowing.
That's the thing. Um, if there is something that you desire, that you want, but it's ridiculously out of reach,
Yeah.
I would love a beautiful all glass house on a cliff top looking over, beautiful. But I don't have that kind of money. So,
Sounds
what does it matter?
terrible.
But if I had oodles of money, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, should I spend it all on this thing? Or I could always eat some chocolate cake, but if it's not in front of me, most of the time I'm not eating it. But if it's right there, it's always getting eaten.
Yeah.
If it was there every day, I would eat it every day. So I'm with you. I can get that. It's so tempting. And once again, he's a guy so focused on the details, and you have this ability that, and he just cares obviously for her so much. And it ended so traumatically and in a way that took his other parent from him, too. I can only imagine. I mean, I was talking about having a bad day, how tempting it would be to go back and fudge a little something to quote unquote fix that.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It'd be so tempting, and I think that Ben Affleck's Batman also recognizes that. Like,
Well,
yeah, I see why you would want to do this. It's not a good
and
idea, but I get it.
even things that aren't that detrimental, we constantly think, "Man, what if I could go back and
Yes.
change that?" Right? It's like if you're in college and you're taking a final and you really need an A in the class and you missed one question that would
Yeah.
have kept you
Yep.
from getting the grade that you wanted, and you're like, I could just go back and change that one answer,
Yep.
right? And you
Or
constantly think about it because you're like, where would
yes.
I be in my life right now had I changed that answer? Right. And it's little things
Yep.
that can completely shift your timeline, right?
Which is why the running theme in all of these things is don't do it,
Right.
because you never know what is connected to what and what and what and what. And we've actually talked in other episodes about how you never when we did alternate realities, we and Elseworlds, we talked about
Mhm.
how you never really end up in a perfect one. It's just the bad is different, the good is different. And that's the thing is you never know what impacts something else.
Yeah.
And yet, we're talking about small things. Well, I mean, here's a conundrum. Hitler. Let's take an obviously bad thing. Hitler,
Yep,
genocide, the
yep,
Holocaust.
yep.
You have the ability to go back in time and change things. And you don't try and change all of those lives lost.
Right.
It would be hard not to, in some ways, almost feel like a villain yourself. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying it would be hard to convince myself that, oh, well, you don't know how all the little things come together and da da da. It would be hard to convince myself that those little things would add up to something worse than
Right.
what already had happened. And so we give him a hard time, but man, that's a tough. I don't. You know what? I don't want his powers.
Yeah.
That's what I've decided.
Yeah.
Too much pressure.
Yeah, because you look at like something like the Cuban Missile Crisis. We
Yeah.
were so close to
Ugh.
nuclear war.
Yep.
And there's so many different realities where we definitely destroyed the planet that day. Like,
True.
there's
Yeah.
so many different we just happened to get really lucky and really fortunate. But like, if you went back in time before that happened and sharpened a pencil the wrong way, you could have set it all off for all we know, right? Like
When that guy went to sharpen his pencil,
it's like,
that's when it would
oh,
have happened.
you oh
Yeah.
man. You sharpened that pencil, someone stubbed their toe, they told their husband about it, and boom, nuclear war. Because that's how the world that's how it all
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
And
Or is that what we tell ourselves?
right.
Because we don't have the ability to change it. We don't have these powers. And so we have to come up with a way to feel okay
Yeah, we
about the
don't
way the world
actually
is.
know how
Let's
time
twist.
works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's get twisty with this.
It's yeah.
Is that really how it works, or is that just what we tell ourselves because we can't change it?
Right,
Ooh.
because it worked out really conveniently for Marty McFly, right? It's like, "Oh, we like, oh, now my parents are cool again because my dad wasn't a creeper." And it was
Yeah, if you bumble into it, it turns out okay. But if you
yeah,
do something on purpose, it turns out bad. Because he bumbled into his mom, and then things got a little icky for a little while, and then
yeah,
his parents got cool. But he took the almanac, the sports almanac, to try and make some money. He did something on purpose, and he screwed up everything,
everything.
the entire town, if not world.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you bumble into it, it's okay. If you do it on purpose, but once again, maybe this is just what we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, all these little things do impact thing after thing after thing.
And
And at the same time, I mean, could there be ways to better predict this? Because the larger strokes, I mean, I hopefully the person who stubs their toe but while sharpening the pencil isn't the one who has the nuclear codes.
right.
You'd think they'd screen better for that, but
Yeah.
who knows?
But
Yeah.
the thing is the big difference is this is a person that does have the ability to go back and change it, but
Mhm.
otherwise the average human, right,
Right.
we all have those situations where it's so easy to get
Hmm.
stuck in the
Yes.
past, constantly thinking about how could this have gone different, what could I have done to
Mhm.
prevent this, what could I have done to change that, even though we know that we can't, we still get lost in it and ponder it. And a lot of times it ends up leaving us in a worse state because we find a way to blame ourselves for these situations even more. If I had done this, this wouldn't have happened. If I had done that, and but you can't change it. You can't change it, but it can completely wreck you physically, emotionally, looking back at these situations and just wondering what else you could have done, even though what happened happened, and that's the only way it could have
Yes.
happened.
So what's cool about what you're talking about right now is all the things we don't love about the Flash in this movie. When he sees himself in what is the sphere thing called? The time sphere? Is
Yeah,
it that on the nose?
I I normally it's like they call it like the what time treadmill or cosmic treadmill or
Yeah, it's
something,
something like that. Yeah,
but
yeah,
they
yeah.
just ignored
They did a
the
sphere or something in this.
yeah, they did
So
something weird.
so when he essentially fights his future self, he's this monster version with all this stuff caked onto him, and
Mhm.
essentially he's the problem. He just keeps screwing everything up because he can't let go, and it's just like this gunk keeps building on him over and over because he can't let go, and he keeps focusing on the past and not being able to say, "You know what? This is how things are. I can't change it or fix it," or he gets stuck in it. He's a visualization. He's a
Mhm.
visual, a physical entity that represents what you're describing that people struggle with all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And
With
it's
anxiety, with depression, these are huge things that come up. What you described it so well. Just this fact that we get caught in the past, or we get caught on something, and we just can't let it go.
right.
But in not letting it go, it becomes its own beast and monster.
Yeah. And honestly, it's funny because like I already overthink things like
Mm,
horribly. I already overthink things. And I look back at like some of my closest friends and how we met. And I'm
mm,
like, oh my God, what if I decided not to go
yep.
eat wings with everyone that night? I might have never met them. And then I might not be friends with them. And then, oh my God, what would my life be like if I wasn't friends with them? And I'm sitting there like panicking for no
Mm,
reason about a situation like that. I literally do this every day.
yeah.
Why? Horrible, right? It's horrible because I'm putting myself through so much unnecessary stress, right? It's like, no,
Mhm.
Eden, look, you're you're friends, you're friends with David Brittany. You love them. And I'm like, but what if I never met them? That's scary. And it's like, but like, and it's like, why are you stressing yourself out? You could be doing literally anything else,
Yep.
and you're just stressing yourself out with these hypothetical situations, right? Like, oh wow,
Mhm.
what if I had never met my wife? Like that's crazy. What would my life be like? And it's you get to this point where and I spiral.
Mhm.
I spiral and it just snowballs into this big thing. And it's like, Keaton, what's wrong? This completely hypothetical situation in my head is what's wrong, and
Yep.
I'm not okay, and I need a moment, right?
Yeah, yeah. And some people think forward. So, potential bad things that could happen in the future, or they might do both. But exactly what you're talking about, where you get stuck, you're ruminating. It's just cycling over and over in your mind. It's almost becoming this obsessive thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially so I kind of think this is why a lot of creative people, unfortunately, also there's a stronger correlation with mental health diagnoses and symptoms. Because if you're really able to creatively like visualize and put this concept almost into a reality in your head, it it pulls just like you're talking about. You can feel it as if it's actually happening.
Mhm.
And that's probably why some people, for example, are really great actors because they can pull for these sorts of things. But,
Oh, yeah.
you're right. It can take up so much time and energy. And how can you step back from it so that you're able to kind of take the muck off of Barry Allen, so to speak, and slow things down and acknowledge, like you were talking about, hey, acknowledging that, wait a minute, this didn't happen though.
Yeah.
Things are good.
Yeah.
Or
Snapping
wait
out
a
of it.
minute, this hasn't happened yet. I'm not going to be able to predict the future. It's not a superpower I have, and I'm ruining the present
Yeah.
by thinking about the past or the
And
future. Let me be in the now.
yeah. And I feel so bad. Honestly, I feel so bad for Barry because having that ability, it's that is the weight of the world on your shoulders right there because anybody that has experienced loss or grief, knowing you had the power to go back and change it and choosing not to is an impossible task. It is such an impossible task. when you lose someone that you just absolutely love or they mean the world to you and you just
Yeah.
think, "Hey, I could have done this one thing and
Mhm.
changed it." And saying, "Hey, no, you can't do that because you don't know what it'll do to the rest of the world." It's hard to care. It's
Yeah.
hard to care about the rest of the world when it's
Yeah.
someone that close to you that was your world.
Yeah. And let me slightly change something in your verbiage that makes it that much worse for him. You
Mhm.
said, "Could have done something." Maybe not worse, but they're different. So could is in the past. Here's something I could have done. I cannot do something now is what that implies.
Right.
And with Barry, it's got this other like kind of layer to it because he can. It's
Yeah.
not just that he could. He also can.
Yeah.
He can now so his present can include going to the past.
Right.
I don't know how to say that in an easier way to understand, but he can do something. He
Yeah.
can do something now. He can do something tomorrow. He will never get to a point where it's just a could. I could have, unless he loses his powers or
Yeah.
some weird thing happens with time and space that I would not understand, that somehow prevents it. He would always have that option in his back pocket.
Yeah.
It's essentially, I've got that chocolate cake in that room
Yeah.
staring at me
Boom.
every minute,
Right there.
second, millisecond, every single day, and I'm never going to eat any of that chocolate cake. I'm sorry, guys. I do not have that kind of self-control. Mm-mm.
Whatever.
And I don't care about chocolate cake like I care about my husband or my close friends or, like you were talking about. That's not even with the emotional connection and the distraught, the guilt, the sad, all of the things. Because like you said, when there's someone so close to you, people that have lost someone like that, they can understand what you're talking about. How much does the world matter? And it's not as easy as saying, "Oh, that person's selfish." No,
Yeah.
it's just that's how much that connection means.
Yeah. And in this situation, he goes back, he saves his mom, but it just so happens that it destroys the world because in this universe, Clark Kent doesn't exist. And the thing is, they time travel movies,
Spaghetti.
they can just make the rules up for themselves because it's like, oh,
And the
well,
rules
and the rules are look, there's a Michael Keaton Batman, there's a George Clooney Batman, there's a Ben Affleck Batman, and they're all in this movie at some point. Right?
so their rule with this is spaghetti.
Yeah.
So they were saying essentially, so there's this intersection between the timelines, but if you change something, it just kind of the whole thing shifts
Yeah.
around this counterpoint where you changed it. And honestly, I don't know enough about these I am not in the realm where people talk about time and space and da da da. So I don't know how much that makes sense versus not to the people who do that kind of science. But yeah, it they did kind of shift it in a weird different way where they could change anything,
Right.
not just that point and forward. And so it completely threw him through a loop. I mean, who can blame him for not really
And it's funny
figuring that out?
because they changed their time travel rules mid-movie, right? Because Barry goes back in time to save his mom
Oh,
and succeed, right? But then
yeah.
later on, when they're battling Zod and all the
Yeah.
other Kryptonians, what he realizes is no matter how many times he goes back in time, Batman and Supergirl still die, and he can't prevent it. It's like
Huh.
something that can't be prevented. But he was able to prevent the mom from dying. And I was thinking, okay,
Well, they said that I don't remember what they called them, but there are certain events that, yeah,
have to
are
happen. That's right. They
unchangeable
do say
that
that.
have to
Like,
happen.
right. Like, apparently Bruce Wayne's parents have to die. Like, because there's always a Batman, no matter what universe. Like,
Which sperm hit that egg might shift
right,
because who is Bruce Wayne
right,
changes, but those parents always gonna die.
right. And it was funny because like when they introduced Supergirl, like one thing that I was really happy about is they gave in this movie, they gave Supergirl the temper. It's something that's like
Mm.
in comic books, Supergirl has an absolute temper. And I laughed because when I was watching the movie with my friend, I leaned over to him and I was like, she's not going to have any issue whatsoever snapping Zod's neck. Like, she will not think twice, and I'm here for it. Like, I was really excited for. I was like, oh man, like, yeah, this this is gonna be great. I want to see how this plays out. But Barry's put in that situation again where it's like, hey, these are people that mean something to me. I met them yesterday, but nonetheless, they mean something to
Yeah.
me. I'm going to try and go back in time. And it's a younger, flawed Barry that doesn't
Mhm.
understand the repercussions, while the older Barry that's back there in that timeline trying to fix things is like, bro, you got to trust me. It, it, it just can't happen. I'm sorry.
Oh, but that I'm sorry,
Right.
but
It's like, "What are
then
you
that
doing here,
dude
bro?" Like, yeah, it's
yeah, but then that dude okay, fine, he made his mistakes, he's trying to teach his younger self. Younger self doesn't wanna listen, which, and then he goes back and he doesn't set it right.
he
So,
still decides to change something.
he still decides to change it, and also, given how they talk about time in this, was there even a guarantee that if he went back and undid what he did, that things would just right itself?
Right,
Or is it, like, too late because everything's all shifted, so now it'll just shift a different way?
right. He still went back in time, met his mom, hugged her. Like, that there's
Oh, yeah,
still that
yeah.
whole thing that's like, uh,
Time
somehow
travel
that somehow
movies.
that equaled George Clooney. Somehow. It's like, "Sorry, bro, you should not have gotten that last hug from your mom because guess what? Batman and
Nipple
Robin."
Batman.
Guess what? Arnold Schwarzenegger is Mr. Freeze now, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like,
Oh, I need to watch that movie this weekend.
yes.
Um, yeah, time travel movies, they always have their issues. This
Mhm.
one definitely had a look, it did what a lot of those movies do. It touched on things just enough to hope that you wouldn't pay attention to the time
Yeah,
travel stuff. They
yeah,
give you enough so you don't just automatically ask yourself questions, but not enough to really show you all of the giant holes.
yeah,
So yeah,
and they all
that's one
do
of the
them.
things where you sit with it more, the more
Yeah,
issues you have.
they all do them. In game,
Yep.
in game did it too. And they're like, "Oh,
Mm,
yeah, there are multiple realities, and you can't change the other ones, but for no reason at all, there's a 90-year-old Captain America here now. Just let it be." Right? And it's okay, whatever you say. Like, they time travel
yeah,
movies just do their own thing. And
yeah,
but this one I did love the amount of heart that it had because
yeah.
it's like I really felt for Barry because
Mhm.
it's his mom, and
Yeah,
he's he's also angry at the Barry with the mom because he feels like that Barry is more whole as a person.
yeah.
It's like you have friends, your apartment's clean, you have roommates that know you and know your name. Like,
Mhm.
you just and
So
he's angry
yeah,
because he's looking
which
at what he sees as a better version of
yeah,
himself.
which actually hits back on what we are talking about. What could I have done versus what can I do?
Right.
And actually, maybe this makes I don't know if this makes it even worse or not, but kind of hitting on what you're talking about here is I can do something about it. It will never write it for me,
Yeah.
not this version of me. It
Right.
doesn't transplant him into the body of this other Flash, at least in the way they do it in this movie.
Right. It's
So
not yeah.
for him, it's never for him.
Yeah. It's not the pain and the anguish and the hurt, it's all still there.
Yeah,
Right? It's all still there. And even if you try and do something to fix it, what happened to you still happened, right?
yeah,
And even and you can try to undo it, you can do everything you can, but it's still something that is there, right? It's kind of like if you lose a pet, right?
Mm,
You lose a pet, and then later on you get another pet. Okay,
mm,
that does not undo the grief that
right.
you went through losing that first pet,
Yeah,
right? It does not undo it, and you got another pet because maybe it's like maybe I need that companionship.
yeah,
Maybe that'll fix something, and then you end up shocked because it doesn't
yeah.
fix it.
See, this is why me and my cat have a deal where he's not allowed to die.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. We're gonna come back to that. We're that. All right. Okay. Yeah, I got nothing there, and I hope you never get time travel powers because I'm really concerned now that you're going to go back in time and change one thing and prevent this podcast from ever happening. That's my biggest worry.
Ooh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I did enjoy this movie. It was a lot of fun, but like I said, I really like the fact that it had heart, and it also shows how flawed individuals can be, specifically
Mm,
even
mhm.
superheroes, because even when he's like, I cannot fix this. I have to go back and let my mom die, essentially. He still can't quite let it go. He
Yeah.
changes one thing where the dad that let it be so they see that it's the dad on camera so that he
Mhm.
doesn't get arrested. And even then, changing that still shifts the universe. And it's like,
Yeah,
you still can't let time flow naturally. You
yeah.
still changed it.
Oh, maybe the Flash is real, and that is how Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor of California.
There it goes. There it
Instead of
goes.
Mr. Freeze, we got California governor.
Wow.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/bat therapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.